been a while since I've read from Penny's book, so I'm gonna read from Penny's book. We're on chapter 6, and I'm gonna at some point make playlists, so all of these disjointed fragments of books that I'm reading will be accessible in one place at some point. Till then, you'll just have to search if you're interested. Chapter 6, Nuclear Family History. Laura's analysis continues steadily. Twice weekly for extended sessions through the autumn into winter. If she lived closer to Boston, our meetings would be spread out over the week in shorter sessions. Most people come once a week for Jungian analysis, some twice. Laura has ego strength, time, capacity, and motivation to enter into this process at an accelerated rate. Laura is comfortable driving, enjoys it. Her long drive from Vermont south to the Boston area travels through stretches of rolling hills, across farmland, by forests and near small towns. The richness and natural beauty of the seasons becomes a part of the ritual of treatment. She drives by the modest old green mountains, evergreens, and open space. As the time passes, the road winds into and through autumn's radiant colors, eventually followed by the whiteness of winter snowstorms. Gray sky eventually becomes blue. The melting snow reveals the soft green growth of early spring. She continues to use her friend's spare room throughout her treatment, reading and writing into the nights. Laura dives deep into our process, immersing her mind, body, and heart. She talks about her first experience with psychotherapy in the 1950s, when she was about 26 years old. That was the time of her initial cancer diagnosis and treatment. Illness and infections of hepatitis B and C. This was also the time of her decision to divorce her first husband. She engaged in several years of psychotherapy with a male psychiatrist, an experience she described as good. She felt that her doctor had offered her fatherly concern and advice. He was a good father figure, and I needed this, she says. He listened deeply to me, something I didn't have in my father, who was absent so much of the time. I didn't have this with my first husband, who was frequently unavailable to me emotionally. Dr. Carl was someone I felt I could trust. Over many months, Laura records dreams upon waking, sometimes making sketches. She always brings her dream journal into our analytic sessions. Laura interweaves details of her history throughout sessions over time, along with her current daily life concerns and future plans. In any one session, we touch on the past, the present, and sometimes the future. We continue working well together. While in analysis, in and outside of our face-to-face meetings, she is slowly remembering and experiencing much that has been held in her unconscious. Dreams often help. They allow small portions of pain and psychological difficulty to be revealed. This process of slow change, drop by drop over time, allows our conscious mind time to metabolize and integrate the experiences into the context of our conscious life. Laura's more easily accessible conscious concerns relate to her current marriage and family, and her older child, her daughter, Karen. Her life and care have been an ongoing challenge. When Karen was about 16, she began acting in disturbing and self-defeating ways following a car accident. She had been driving and suffered head trauma, a concussion that required stitches. Laura didn't remember if CT scans were performed as part of the medical protocol in the 1960s. Not long after the injury, Karen began to have numerous difficulties in high school. She attempted and failed to hold a series of part-time jobs. Enormously discouraged at the state of her life and depressed, Karen at age 17 attempted suicide with wrist cutting and an overdose of pills at home. Karen was hospitalized for several months. Her younger brother Mark was at home when this occurred. Mark was losing his sister to a head injury, or a frightening illness, or both, Laura said, covering her face with her hands. He witnessed helplessly as his sister was carried from our home and committed to a hospital. This was a profoundly distressing, family-shattering experience. The loss of stability, safety, order, and emotional connection is traumatic for any family. Frightening and tragic events like severe injury and attempted suicide cause every family member to suffer and be thrown into confusion, shame, anxiety, sadness, and sometimes anger. Disrupted daily routines and life plans inevitably cause feelings of helplessness. Every member feels some failure for failing to prevent the tragedy. I wait for Laura to compose herself. It was a terrible nightmare, she says slowly. Emergency hospital attendants forcefully taking Karen, who was physically struggling, away from home. Eugene was there. We were all confused. We didn't know the right thing to do. It was horrible. After her hospitalization, Karen tried again to live at home and attend school. Her efforts continually fell apart. Laura and Eugene tried different schools. The outpatient psychiatric help they found for her wasn't enough. Karen told me that everything was betraying her and that life was impossible, Laura said. She withdrew into her room. Socializing was too painful. None of us could really imagine the hell she was in. Later, after numerous treatments in several residential facilities, it was clear that she was descending into a psychosis. Medications only subdued some symptoms, but nothing really helped her. Laura inhales sharply, looks away, crying, closing her eyes tightly, and brings her arms up over her chest, over her heart. She is in deep emotional pain. Finally, she takes a breath. Laura turns back to look at me pointedly. Was it an underlying brain problem? She asks. Was it schizophrenia? Was it the head injury in the car accident? Was it the medication I was given when I was pregnant with her? Was it genetic? Was I a failure as a mother? Laura couldn't protect Mark from this terrible unraveling of his older sister's life. I have no doubt that this series of traumatic events was deeply wounding for her son Mark. Laura's love of her children and investment in their lives is evident, as is her confusion, shame, and sense of failure. The tragedy of mental illness is difficult for all family members, weighing especially heavily on Laura, on any mother. She reported that Karen and Mark's biological father was unable to participate in Karen's treatment and did not financially help with the overwhelming expenses. His communication was not dependable, and his visits were inconsistent. His lack of consistency was extremely disappointing for Laura. She initiated meetings with her primary physician and Dr. Carl, her former psychiatrist. He met with Karen. He interviewed and evaluated her. Consulting with other colleagues, the physicians concurred and recommended that the best course of treatment was to support continuing psychiatric hospitalization with the possibility of long-term residential care. Living at home was impossible and heartbreaking. Karen spent months in a private psychiatric hospital. It was not a realistic long-term solution for her care. Laura tells me that she continues to seek better treatments for her daughter and follows research on schizophrenia. Currently, Karen is in a halfway home and attends a psychiatric day program. Laura is exploring the most humane and helpful facilities in the country. Her ex-husband remains in her children's lives in a very limited way. Nick is very important to Mark. He talks about his visits with his father. I think it's important for Karen too, although her words trail off. I reflect to myself that the younger son lost his older sister as playmate and adolescent friend. They were pals, good buddies, Laura said. Until the accident when Karen was 16. As I have not met with Mark or the family, I do not know what feelings or realities are true for them. It is not difficult to imagine that Mark could feel irrationally responsible, or even experience survivor's guilt, wondering why he was spared illness. Mark was unable to save or rescue his older sister. The siblings of ill or mentally disturbed sisters and brothers may feel helpless, and they are often unintentionally emotionally neglected in the crisis, chaos, and aftermath. Parents lose the child they knew and imagined into the future. They struggle to accept the unfathomable child, now present or hospitalized. This stranger is confusing, sometimes frightening, and unable to communicate with clarity. Siblings, relatives, friends, and community are unsure how to relate or help. Laura's life energy and a good deal of the family's finances were, and continue to be, devoted to the details of a support system for Karen. This comes at the expense of other family members and herself. Laura visits, writes, and dreams of her. Karen is now unable to live in New England with the family, where she had endangered herself by wandering away from home, without cost, hat, or boots. Without coat, hat, or boots. In the bitter, cold New England winter. On visits at home, she acted inappropriately, although not aggressively, toward others, and behaved dangerously. Failing to turn off stove burners, carelessly leaving burning cigarettes around, and other minor, disturbing behaviors. The family was advised to have Karen hospitalized in a more temperate climate with the possibility of a halfway home to follow. This is the advice they are following now. These family difficulties are compounded by the realities of a blended family system. 4 stepchildren, 2 from each partner. Each child has specific emotional needs, physical needs, and a unique history. Eugene's children had their own challenges with that disruptive divorce which their mother fought in court battles. In addition, Eugene's children had their own traumatic experiences in early years. Children of divorce can be additionally hindered in emotional development by confusing communication, parental tension, and the child's irrational guilt, neglect, along with many other issues. Competition over parents' limited amount of time for practical attention and emotional investment, as well as competition over social and financial resources, are inevitable and appear to be true in this family. The greatest obvious challenge to Laura and her family is Karen's deterioration into chronic mental illness, leading to emotional and physical separation from them. This was and continues to be a strange kind of living hell with no resolution, no completion, she says. These are losses with no end in sight. Karen's illness is severe and chronic. Following these family disruptions, younger son Mark struggled to construct a future. He wondered about higher education. He thought about and tried several careers. It wasn't easy for him to move forward. Always interested in writing, he followed the growing edge of technology and media and decided to pursue this. He is often away and has become increasingly inaccessible, Laura says. He's unavailable, especially emotionally in these past few years. He returned to the States after several years in Munich, Germany. He doesn't reveal much of that part of his life to me. She continues to see him when she accompanies Eugene on business travel to Stanford University. Mark keeps a small apartment south of San Francisco. She makes herself available to him and is open to anything he wants to discuss. From the view of psychological development, I can see that Laura's younger son felt compelled to leave home and establish his own identity in the face of Laura and Eugene's work successes and his sister's illness. Like all young adults, Mark must find his own way in life. Laura talks of missing him and feeling guilty that she was not available enough in his early childhood while working as a single mother. She then fell in love with Eugene, and during her children's adolescence, she was immersed in helping him with research projects. Once Karen's crisis began to unfold, Laura's attention was increasingly preoccupied with her daughter's problems in daily life. Laura expresses worry about what will happen when Mark is older. I'm wondering if she's also thinking about her own future. She clearly wants a more mature relationship with Mark now as an adult, and struggles to reach him, as well as worrying about her daughter's complex future. Most children are angry, some quite justifiably, toward parents in a divorce. Withdrawal can also be a form of passive anger. As I am Laura's therapist, not her family's, I am not aware of Mark's actual relationship with his biological father, his experience of his older sister, his thoughts and feelings about Laura, Eugene, or the course and content of his life. I can only work with Laura's report. I will never know how accurate or self-deceptive a report is, and must rely on intuition and experience. As our sessions together progress, I can see that Laura is striving to come to terms with her failures, real and imagined, as a mother. She is realizing that she cannot undo the past, but she can work to find personal meaning in her suffering. She must grieve and mourn her losses and accept her human failings. Can she forgive herself? Laura can make the effort and take responsibility to act differently in her relationships as she moves forward in her life. We return to her dreams to explore all the possible meanings that her initial dream could have for her. Layers of the meaning of dreams unfold over time. For example, the stones held together on a cord could be related to the binding together of the blended family. Each of the 6 stones could represent a member of her family. The connection is there. They are clearly bound together with a rough cord. The second image, the enigmatic monolith, could also represent the mystery of her daughter's psychosis. Awesome, dark, impenetrable, and of enormous weight. Laura accepts the possibility of these personal and symbolic meanings.